Pakistan to Islamabad to try and close a deal, if you will, on ending the war. That's an impossibility. It strikes me as just ludicrous nonsense. So I would urge Prime Minister Modi to talk to his advisors and call President Trump. Say, we know that you're planning on this. We understand that. We respect that. And Pakistan has things to offer. I would be very frank about that. But I think we can do more for you. Here are the reasons why I think we could host a more successful round of discussions and negotiations. So I hope that that will happen. And as I talked to you before, Pakistan is not what I would call a civilizational state. It's part of a civilizational complex, if you will. But India itself is one of these core civilizational states, a large and powerful continental state that has remarkable, not necessarily ethnic homogeneity, but homogeneity of culture and mentality and thinking, which is desperately needed, in the world today. I mean, the things that we're dealing with in the United States and almost everywhere else are tensions that threaten to tear us apart. India, miraculously, has managed to hold itself together in a way that's lasted for thousands of years. And it has a very strong sense of principle. And it is not an aggressive power in the sense that it does not attack its neighbors. It is not trying to expand its sphere of power or control. If anything, we would be better off if India exerted a great deal more influence in a place like the Indian Ocean and its surroundings. I don't know if your countrymen are aware, but India has exercised some very good judgment in the Persian Gulf. They've used their naval combatants to escort tankers.
Yes,
They have
not on
negotiated. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's brilliant. I think it's exactly the right thing to do. And you can do that. If we tried to do that, they'd sink us.
Yeah.
I think we need to take notice of this. And I think there is a role in the maritime sphere for India that it hasn't really played a much larger role. We keep building these damn headquarters that are supposed to manage the world. We changed Pacific Command, which was really focused just on the Eastern and Western Pacific from the standpoint of U.S. naval power, into some sort of monstrosity called Indo.
Yeah, you're not a fan of Indo-Pac
Pacific.
Command. You're,
What is going on? I mean, are we taking ownership of the Indian Ocean? Are we insane? We should be grateful that you have a power like India that can assert itself in a positive way there. So that's a long way of getting around this whole business of look at what is happening with Pakistan. The second thing I would say, and this is something that's not understood here, the Straits of Hormuz are functionally closed, except for those exceptions which India, China, now Japan have managed to negotiate. Who benefits in India from paying $120 for a barrel of oil? I don't see that anybody in India benefits in any way, shape, or form. The United Airlines CEO in the United States is now planning for $175 a barrel this year. My point is, India cannot afford to remain a spectator on the sidelines in this conflict because this war is not ending in 2 weeks. It's not ending in 2 months. The companies that survive it, particularly in India, and dominate it afterwards, will be the ones that understood this as a real war, not as just a market event. Too many times I hear people talk about, well, the impact on the market, the impact this. There's no understanding that when fuel goes up, fertilizer goes up. Food goes up, animal feed goes up, everything, all these prices rise simultaneously. This is what I think is happening today in your sector. It's beginning to happen here. Food, fuel, fertilizer, feed. There's no off-ramp right now, and we desperately need an off-ramp. We can't provide it. We have no way to walk out of this thing. And then I noticed that your stock market lost over 10,000 points in a single month.
Yeah.
The financial media calls it a correction. I call it a disaster. And I think global equity markets are probably going to fall another 30 to 50% before the end of this year because the energy lifeline, if it's not severed, is pathetic. It's weak. Now, I'm not saying this to frighten people. I'm simply pointing to what I think are, unavoidable consequences. So anyway, putting all of that together, I know it sounds grim, but I think it needs to sound grim. I don't think we really get it.
With all due respect, how do you think India can come and essentially make any sort of guarantees, as if you're a good faith negotiator, make any guarantees on behalf of US and Israel or Iran. I mean, there are countries who are floundering to try and get Iran to sort of put down their arms and to get a ceasefire going. How do you do that if a country like Israel will not even listen to the United States? I mean, President Trump said that they're holding off on any attacks till conversations with Iran go on. But at the same time, Israeli missiles are flying into Iran unabated. So what do we do in that situation?
Well, I don't know that you, as a single actor, can guarantee anything.
Yeah.
The reason I pick India is because I think President Trump, if he listens to anybody at this point, is probably going to listen to Prime Minister Modi. Remember, you are this large and powerful state economically, even militarily, more so than I think you appreciate. And that's why I was talking about maritime power. He knows that. He knows your position in the global economy, and your position is growing and will continue to grow. There's no reason why it should not. So I think he will listen. I think the Israelis will listen. Now, the man who has to deliver on the Israelis, let's be frank, is ultimately Donald Trump.
Yes.
You can't be expected to do that, but you can at least reassure the Israelis that you're not pushing a solution in particular that is going to destroy them. In other words, as I said before, if the Israelis heard that they were supposed to show up in Islamabad for a meeting, I think they'd laugh it off. This is ridiculous. Why should we trust anything those people say? These people are just as soon kill us as anybody else. That's not true for India. India is in a very good position that way. So the second thing is, if you look at the points that we, and now the Iranians, they have now published what they say are their conditions for a ceasefire.
Yep.
The more points you put on the list, the less likely you are to get an agreement. Someone like Modi has to sit down with the two sides and say, look, you've got 15 points, Mr. Trump. The supreme leader and his representatives, they have 11 points. That's a non-starter.
Yeah.
We need to find a solution that moves us down the lists to say 2 or 3 points on which we can generally agree that then become the basis for future talks. And in the interim, a ceasefire. I think that's something that Prime Minister Modi could do. Now, he's not a miracle worker. He's not a magician. And if he walks into this and he gives it his best shot, that's all that we can expect. If people are just unwilling and will resist any kind of compromise, you're not going to get anywhere anyway. The problem that I see here in this country is that, first of all, the vast majority of Americans don't want anything to do with a war.
Right.
Which is a very good thing. I mean, Americans don't want this. Now, historically, we haven't wanted any of the wars, but our governments have consistently ignored us. I can take you all the way back to 1917. Nobody wanted to go to war with Germany or Austria. We didn't want anything to do with the war in Europe, and the only reason we were drawn into the Second World War was because the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. But what most Americans don't realize is how hard we worked to provoke the Japanese into doing that. That's another issue. Then we fought in Korea, and that was an accident that no one really expected. We were fortunate. We had Eisenhower as a president who said, look, we don't want a war with China. We don't want a war with anybody. We're going to end this as soon as possible. And so he stopped all the offensive operations, restored the status quo ante, and brought it to an end. That was good. And under Eisenhower, we avoided a lot of problems. Now, it wasn't perfect, but I'm saying as far as we're concerned as Americans, we didn't march into anybody else's country and kill large numbers of people or lose large numbers of people. 1965 changes everything. And since 1965 in Vietnam, we have been busy meddling in the affairs of other people's countries. Let's be frank.
Yes.
The American people don't want it. They've had it. They're fed up with it. And I think President Trump privately knows he's on very shaky ground if he continues to take actions that extend this war, which is what he's doing right now. Let there be no mistake about it. So I think there's an advantage for Prime Minister Modi can reach him on that level. I think the Iranians, we can all sit here and go through everything wrong that's happened between Iran and the United States since 1948. I mean, the Iranians have been the victims of any number of coups and coup attempts and problems in their country. Now, I'm not saying they have no They have no responsibility for what has not gone well for them. We are all responsible for what happens in our countries. But we can go back over that. Unfortunately, Americans tend to regard history as something that doesn't matter.
Mm.
The average American thinks history began 2 weeks ago, if you're lucky. That's a big problem. So Americans say, well, we don't want to go back and talk all of that. Well, Prime Minister Modi can help with this. You have been through a lot of things in your own history. Many, many countries in the world have been victims of imperialism and colonialism and so forth. That's something that Prime Minister Modi can understand and explain to us, as well as discuss with the Iranian leadership. So I guess all I'm saying is that somebody's got to make an attempt to break this deadlock. I don't see us doing it.
Your views obviously will resonate with a lot of Indians today, Colonel Macgregor. And just after the Pakistan's name came up as a possible mediator, we also noticed that President Trump and Prime Minister Modi had a phone conversation as well. That was tweeted. So I don't know. Maybe they are talking about somehow working together to bring an end to the war over here. India's concerns are pretty are limited for the energy security over there primarily. I want to talk about what the briefing that President Trump gave today or yesterday at the Oval Office, where he essentially said that Iran had given him a gift, a present, that he believes that maybe they're on the right track. Then that gift is what uh, it makes him believe that he's on the right track with them. Do you think it's something to do with ships moving through the Hormuz? What do you speculate?
Well, first of all, let's keep in mind that the Straits of Hormuz are not closed to everyone.
Yeah.
And right now, if you're Israeli flagged or American flagged, or you're an ally of Israel in this conflict or ours, you're going to be denied access. But otherwise, the straits are open. I think he's beginning to figure that out, and that's helpful. On the other hand, he says a lot of things that none of us understand, that quite frankly don't fit within any sort of strategic framework that makes sense. What's this gift? I have no idea. We all sat around and said, well, where is it? Bring it into the Oval Office. Show us the gift.
It's worth
Uh,
billions of dollars, is what he said.
well, I don't, I just don't see any evidence for it. And of course, if you look or turn to the Iranian leadership, they are pretty consistent in their stand. They say, no, we haven't asked for negotiations. We haven't had any direct talks. And they know nothing about it as far as they're concerned. So unless the Iranians step up and suddenly say, oh, yes, we've promised the following to President Trump, I wouldn't take it very seriously.
Do you think this Friday is a bit of a head fake, a bit of a ruse to a larger invasion that's about to come? We saw before these strikes happened, there's a huge this massive American buildup, military buildup over there, and there were talks about a deal, no deal. It culminated with strikes on Iran. We're seeing it all over again. There's again talks about a ceasefire and all. Do you think that there'll be an American invasion, and what would it look like?
Keep in mind that President Trump, whether he cares to admit it publicly, faces humiliation nationally and internationally. Now, why is that the case? Because he's grossly miscalculated, grossly underestimated the challenge that he took on when he decided to attack Iran. I think he listened to a lot of vacuous promises from the Israeli side. The Israelis tend to feel contempt for the various Muslims and countries that surround them, which is a very bad thing. I think he bought the argument that this would be quick and dirty and that he could somehow or another profit from it. He now knows that's not possible. So, this is back to what does he do next? And I think his instincts are saying, I've got to double down and smash Iran. I've got to rub their noses in the dirt. So I never took seriously this 5-day pause. If anything, the pause that he's taking, and by the way, as you point out, that doesn't apply to the Israelis. The Israelis are bombing oil infrastructure, plants, anything they can. And that doesn't help matters, but they're not terribly responsive at this stage to President Trump. I think they regard him as a bought man who's going to have to do whatever they tell him. I think that's a mistake because I do know President Trump, and if you push him too hard in one direction, he's going to push back. I think, though, at the moment he's looking at this as a 5-day pause, and I suppose that his inner circle including the military, they're all sitting in rooms saying, how do we get out of this? How does this end? What's the end state look like? What can we accept? And an awful lot in Washington is mortgaged to vanity. You
Hmm.
know, in other words, we can't do X because that will make us look as though we lost. And as I point out to people, what happened in Vietnam? And people say, what do you mean? I said, we lost. And what did we do? And everybody says, well, I don't remember. We left.
Mortgaged on the collateral of thousands of American lives?
Yeah, we left. We just left.
Hmm.
We lost and we left. And we said, too bad about the 58,500 American lives. And oh, by the way, too bad about the nearly 2 million Vietnamese we killed, needlessly and pointlessly. We just left. And many, many years later, you had people that went back to Vietnam from the United States, some of whom had served in Vietnam, like former Senator Webb. And they went there and said, look, this was a terrible mistake and we regret it deeply and we want to do business with you. And much to everybody's surprise, the Vietnamese were willing to cooperate. And we've had better relations since then than ever in our history. But this is a bad habit with America. I mean, I dislike it, but this is the way we do business. And I think that at some point this could happen again. But right now, I think you're going to see this war take on new dimensions. Now, when we talk about invading Iran, I love to go back to the Dardanelles in 1915 when the British decided, well, it was really Churchill, who was always severely inebriated when he made most of his decisions, and he was equivalent to the Secretary of the Navy or Minister for the Navy. And he said, well, we need to seize the Dardanelles, and once we've seized these from the Turks, then the Royal Navy can sail through the Dardanelles, through the Straits, and it can take Constantinople under fire.
Hmm.
And we'll land more troops in Constantinople and drive the Turks out of the war.